Great to be here this morning, and as he said, I'm Adam Fridenstine. I will introduce my family for those that don't know us. There's several folks I don't know, and that's exciting. My wife Esther, if you want to raise your hand, this would be Pastor Brown's oldest daughter, and then our oldest son Joel, and next is Micah, and then Isai is in the kids class. We're excited to be here. I started showing up around here, had special interest in this young lady up here up front, and I started showing up about 16 years ago, and I've just kind of come in and out, and I was talking to Brother Straight this morning, and I said, man, there's some people who have been here that whole time, and that's awesome, and I enjoy seeing new people as well. As Brother Allen mentioned, we've been in El Salvador now for 12 years after a year in language school in Costa Rica, and excited about what the Lord is doing there. Tonight, I'm going to take some time to share an update video, share some updates about those ministries. There'll be several ministries, and also I'll share some updates about other ministries that you guys support that I happen to know about. The Carena family, they're working there with us. I'll give you an update about them. The Menjivar family, they're sent out of our church in El Salvador, and they planted a church in Nicaragua. I'll give an update about them. Also, your church is supporting the Christian school. I'll give an update about that, as well as our family, what we've been doing. So I'll be doing all that tonight. If you don't normally come out on a Sunday night, I don't know why. You wouldn't normally be here anyway, but you'll definitely want to be here tonight to get to see what the Lord's been doing in El Salvador. Very exciting times. Let's look in 2 Samuel chapter 18 this morning. I love the Bible. I love reading through the Bible. I love learning new things. And this story has got a not famous person who did some pretty incredible things. And we're going to see that. And so we're going to start by just kind of doing a little bit of evaluation just to see who knows the Bible here this morning. So I think most people would say, well, I have my Bible. I know some of my Bible. I doubt that anyone would say I know everything about the Bible. I've never met anyone who said that. Anyone who's studied it enough realizes this is not something you're just going to get. It's alive. It's awesome. But there's some people that kind of stand out in the Bible more than others. So let's just see if anyone's learned about some of these standout people. Anyone ever heard of the Apostle Paul? Raise your hand. Okay, yeah, definitely. Okay, King David? Excellent. Ahimaaz? Less, okay? You're like, some of them were in the first service, like, oh yeah, but that's a repeat, you're kind of like, hey, this is not a real famous name, and I don't know if it's actually the right way to say his name, but that's how we're going to say it today. And you say, well, how are you supposed to pronounce that? However his mom did, but yeah, I haven't talked to her recently, I don't know, but this is how we're going to pronounce it today. And so we see this guy, Ahimaaz, and he's kind of a person in the Bible. He does have a name, but we don't know much about him. Even when I say his name, nobody's like, oh yeah, of course. It's just kind of like, okay. And so we don't know a lot about this guy. There's some people that we learn about, and even from young kids, we kind of learn of their story. And there's not anybody in the Bible that's not important. Some people, they're mentioned and they don't have their name mentioned, and they're always remembered as people without their name in the Bible. Some have a very significant role. Some have a role you're like, okay, why was that detail in the Bible? And some of those questions I still don't know. Sometimes I learn why that detail is in the Bible, and sometimes I say, well, one day I'll learn why that detail is in the Bible. I haven't got there yet. But Ahimaaz is actually mentioned several times in this section of the Bible. And he has a significant role, but we don't know much about him. And we're going to learn a little more about him today. I'm going to give you a brief overview where we are going into this. I believe when we read the Bible, we should understand the context. We should read the Bible in context. But we're not going to take time to read the entire context today. I'll give you just a rundown of what's going on. So we have King David, and he's fled from his throne, from his rule as king, because his son Absalom has come in and is trying to take over. Well, essentially has taken over. He's taken some time and won the hearts of many of the people. So David leaves with many faithful people. It's a small army. Absalom's left with most of the kingdom. He stays around there in the palace for a while, making a mess of things, and then is coming out to have battle and to wipe out King David, assuring Absalom's place on the throne. Absalom's already killed one of his half-brothers previously. He's just kind of a bad hombre, and he's not not got a lot good going for him, but a lot of people like him. He's a attractive person. He has a lot of kind qualities, but he's got some bad morals. And so just because somebody looks nice and talks good doesn't make them a good person. And that's kind of where Absalom's at. And so they're going to this conflict. David does not go out to battle. He has to stay away from the battle because the whole idea is to kill him. If he's not in the battle, that's much more difficult. But Absalom does go to this battle. And so as they go into this battle, you have both are really the same people, just some of them are faithful to David and some of them have now become faithful to Absalom. And they have a battle, they have a conflict. And in that conflict, Absalom was famous for his long hair. And the Bible says he had beautiful hair, and it was his thing that once a year he would cut his hair and weigh it. I don't know, it's kind of a thing. It's not really my style. Some of you guys have definitely don't have that style. You know, it's not normal. That was Absalom's thing. Well, his long hair got caught in tree branches as he was in this battle, and his animal goes out from under him, and he's literally hanging from his hair in a tree. Kind of a weird story. And you're like, is this real? It's in the Bible. It's absolutely real. You say, well, how did he get stuck there? It's just God working out these things. Somebody tells Joab, who's David's general, hey, Absalom's hanging from a tree from his hair. And Joab says, oh, why didn't you kill him? He says, well, you heard King David. He told us to be careful with his son. Don't kill him. And Absalom's not a young man. He's definitely, he doesn't have a wife or kids, but he's definitely old enough to be a father or even a grandfather at this point. But Absalom is there, and Joab says, all right, we'll take care of that. So Joab goes and kills Absalom, the one who's trying to kill King David. They blow the trumpets, battle's over. There's no reason to fight anymore because the new king, or the wannabe king, is now dead. So we're going to keep the original king, King David, the one who God anointed. And so as all this is going on, we go into where we are in this part of the story, 2 Samuel chapter 18, starting in verse 19. Then said Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, let me now run. That's the title of the message today, let me run. And bear the king tidings, how that the Lord hath avenged him of his enemies. Now, so the first thing we see about Ahimaaz is this guy's a volunteer. This guy sees something he's done and says, I want to do it. Now, I'll mention here that Ahimaaz is not a soldier. He is not actually even supposed to be here on the battlefield. And we'll talk about what he is, but we can start by saying what he isn't. He's not a soldier. He's not a messenger. He's not the guy that normally does this. He's just a volunteer that says, I can do this, let me run. And I'm not sure how he was familiar with protocol. I don't know how well that was known. What to do when you have a victory. But he knew somebody had to go and share this news. And so before Joab, the general, says, okay, we got to tell the king we just won, he says, somebody needs to tell the king, let me go. Let me run. And to run requires a lot of effort. Just curious, any runners in here? Anybody who likes running? No, not really. Very few. And I mean, sometimes I'll see people doing exercise, and then I'm freezing up here, just for the record. It's cold in the Northwest. So we're looking for snow. We got snow temperatures with no snow. That's just cold. We get down to 60 sometimes at night in El Salvador, or where we live in El Salvador, and we think we're going to die. We're like, all right, looking for blankets, and it's just so cold at 60 degrees. So it's considerably colder than that here. And so yesterday we sent a small video to the church family back in El Salvador, and we just went alongside the road right about sunset and the rest area and took a little video, and we're all just like shaking in the cold, you know, the wind's blowing, and I'm like, all right, sorry about the shaking camera, but it's cold here. And one of the guys in church messaged me back, he says, hey, wear a warm coat. I'm like, I don't even have a warm coat. Why do I need one? I live in El Salvador. I was there for a year before I realized I didn't even have my only sweater. I had left it in the States the previous trip. And this one day it got a little cold. I was like, oh, I'll just get my sweater out. I don't have it. And sometimes you see people out here running and they're bundled up and they're still running. You're like, you people are weird. It's not fun to go out and run. It's hard work. And it takes a lot of physical conditioning, and it takes discipline. And probably most of the people out here freezing and running, they're not really enjoying it, but they are showing good self-discipline and they're keeping their bodies in shape. And, hats off to them. Go get it, but I'm just not that guy. Obviously, I'm not a runner. You can't maintain a physique like this if you're a good runner. It just doesn't work together. And so if you see this guy, Ahimaaz, he says, let me run. He didn't say, let me walk, let me go. He said, let me run. It requires a lot of effort. It's hard to do. We do some exercise there in El Salvador. It's not what most people would call like actual running. It's, moving and getting the heart pumping. You don't have to do a lot if you're fat and overweight. I mean, you can get your heart pumping pretty fast, and that's kind of my story. And so we have a mountain right next to our house, and we go there, and I was going up and down, and definitely not running, but doing a fast walk or maybe even a jog for a short time, and trying to do this. And it's pretty steep, and there's a lot of, it's called a zigzag path. It's just a lot of up and down, or back and forth, and pretty steep, and it's a good climb. So I've been doing this every week, and was starting to get faster and was challenging different people. But I'm smart. I go with people who have short legs, like my kids. So I have an edge on it. They're taking a lot more steps than I am. And then really most of the people in our area are shorter than I am. So I have an advantage on them when we come to walking. And so I was doing that one day, just how things changed. A couple of the more athletic guys in our ministry said, hey, we're going to do it with you today. I said, oh, that's great. So they're pushing. So one of the guys is short, but he runs like 10K every day. He's just weird. I don't get people like that. I'm like, why would you do that? You have a car, But so he's in really good shape, and so he runs to the mountain, and I drive to the top and then start running when I get up there. But and so he's like, hey, let's go. So he's pushing me. He's like, all right, let's go a little faster. So we're making really good time. And I look at my watch. I'm like, hey man, this is great. We're going to set a new record. We're doing it. So we're going back up the hill, and he's like, man, I'm tired of waiting on you. I'm going to go. And I'm like, waiting on me? Come on, and I'm not going to let this young guy beat me, right? And so I start picking it up, and he takes off, and he's just like running up this hill. He's not even breathing hard. I'm like, you are so weird. And I get about 3/4 of the way up, and I'm like, I'm going to die. This is not going to end well. But I have that peer pressure of these guys half my age who are doing much better than I am. So we're not going to back off. I'm going to die trying. And I thought I was going to. I get to the top, and I felt like my eyeballs were coming out. My ears were going to explode. And they're like, hey, you made it. And I did set a new record. I'm like, that's going to be the last one ever. Like, I can't even breathe. And they said, how you doing? And I just look at him, and I'm like, I'm not doing well. This is hard work. It's like, I think it was like 12 minutes. It's really not a long time. The whole run was like 12 minutes long. But then I was like, okay, I'm definitely kicking the bucket here. This is my last and final run. I will be known as the pastor who died just doing 12 minutes of exercise. And, they're sweating, and then, it's hot there. Definitely not like here. And so it's hot and humid, and they're sweating, and I'm sweating, and they're like, hey, that was great. You did a great job. And I'm looking at them like, you guys are so weird. And they're like talking. I can't even breathe, and they're just carrying on a conversation. And like, all right, well, now we're going to go on what I call the flat spot. It's not flat, but it's, it's wide, and it's easier than that path. And so we start going on that one, and then my legs are feeling like this. I'm like, it's hard work running. I can just stay with walking, and I can do that all day, no problem. Ahimaaz, he said, I want to be a volunteer, but he said, I want to be a volunteer to work hard. Let me run. Let me do something that requires a lot of effort. And he's got to not just run, but he's got to give a message when he gets there. That requires a lot. And what I really like about Ahimaaz is that he's a volunteer. Nobody said, I need you to run. He just said, let me run. It's a totally different mindset. And we as Christians should be volunteers, and we should just see something that needs done and do it. It's not difficult. It's not challenging, but it's really outside of our comfort zone. And that's what sets a lot of people aside. You have the employer and the employee, and a lot of times the only mindset different is the employee is waiting for someone to tell them what to do, and the employer says, well, let's just do it. And then you say, well, I don't like that analogy. Well, I mean, that's just kind of how it works. We have a lot of interns in our ministry. It changes. It's a 2-year internship ministry. I've got over, I don't know exactly, but over 20 young people between the age of 18 and 30 working on our staff. And we've got them right out of high school and our high school and teaching them and training them. And it's awesome to have that mentoring time with them. But one of the things I teach and repeat frequently is if you see something needs done, do it. Don't wait for instructions. Don't wait for me to tell you what to do. I've got one brain and 2 eyes just like you. Just if you see it needs done, just get it done. If you're not capable of doing it, then find somebody who is and make sure it gets done. It doesn't matter if that's your job. We all need to be like that as Christians, that we need to find what needs to get done and we need to do it. Now, that doesn't mean you should jump into a project that you're not qualified for. You see a light bulb burned out in the church, you say, you know what, I'm going to show up when nobody's here and rewire the church building. That's probably not the thing if you're not an electrician, okay? I don't know that they would appreciate that. You're like, this doesn't work. I'll just cut that there and cut that there, and this will be so much better. It's not going to be a blessing. That's not what I'm talking about. But we can all see, like, something needs done and saying, somebody should do that. Do it. Somebody should lead that person to the Lord. That would be you. If the Lord put that on your heart, help them to hear of Christ now. You say, well, somebody needs to fix that broken thing on the church property. Perfect. Bring your ladder. Have at it. We don't need to always wait for somebody else to do something. And we don't need to always wait for somebody else to tell us what to do. As Christians, we need to go forward on purpose by ourselves. And he didn't ask for, and nobody asked for Ahimaas's help. He said, let me run. I want to be part of the solution. I want to be the one to help make this go as it should go. And we need to realize the importance of that mindset. When we look around at the world around us, and there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in Salem. There's a lot of people in all of the surrounding area. I've been up in the Northwest for the last couple of weeks in Seattle and Tacoma and Kent and different areas. There's a lot of people and a lot of new houses indicating more people are settling. And there's a lot of people around here. There's a lot to be done. I'm not sure if you guys have watched the news or not, but there's some weird people up in the Northwest too. I'm sure that excludes the current company, but we were in downtown Seattle, like right there in front of the Space Needle. And as we were there and in that area, I'm like, there's some strange people here. There's some things that are just odd. There's some weird signs around here. Good news is, you don't have to go far to find, marijuana and all kinds of drugs. It's like, okay then, this is interesting kind of a part of the world that people are just making it legal to do really dumb stuff that's really harmful to lots of people. And you get some ideas and you turn on the news about Portland, you're like, okay, Portland, they've got some issues there. That's like your guys' backyard. And you're like, well, we're not Portland. Portland has they're weird. And we realize that there are problems everywhere in the world. Anybody following the conflict in Israel and Gaza? There's problems there. And it doesn't really matter what you think about that conflict, because probably nobody here is on the council of Netanyahu on how they're going to respond to that. It doesn't matter what your opinion is on that. We realize there are problems in this world. We realize that there are issues. These issues are causing harm to other people. The flags at half-mast because of a crazy person or whatever who was attacking people in Maine. And you think, why does this stuff happen? Bottom line, sin nature. That's the deal. That's the problem. So how do we deal with sin nature? With God. He's the answer. He's what we need. It doesn't matter really what the problem is, violence or nonviolence or addiction, or wherever you go with problems, we always come back to the same answer, and the answer is God. We, as Christians, are the ones who need to tell others about Christ. And when we tell about Christ, we're talking about someone who has paid the price for our sins so that you and I can be saved, so that you and I can go to heaven, so that you and I can have this close relationship with God while we're living in earth, and then get to spend the rest of eternity with him. We live in a broken and fallen world, but oh, it's beautiful to see God fix that. Today is the anniversary of a sweet couple in our church, and they've been married longer than us, maybe 18 years now, 17 years, something like that. And they were going through a rough spot several years back, and that's actually how they came to our church. And they were struggling in their marriage and just not enjoying life because it wasn't being done biblically. And we had the privilege of discipling them and helping them. And today, early this morning, I was wishing them happy anniversary. And they're teaching our teen class today, which is normally the class that I teach when I'm in El Salvador. And just amazing to see how God takes broken pieces and just makes them into something beautiful. That's what God does. And as we look at Ahimaaz, we see he was a volunteer, and he said, I want to be part of the solution. As we think of this world around us, it's real easy to complain about pretty much anything. I mean, you can complain about local politics, you can complain about statewide politics, national politics, international politics. You can complain about most anything. It's entirely different to say, oh, what am I going to do about that? It's entirely different to say, I want to be part of that solution. It's entirely different to say, I want to take a track and I want to lead people to the knowledge of a Savior who will transform their life. It's easy to complain. It takes some effort to, like Ahimaaz, say, okay, pick me. I want to work hard to be part of the solution. And that's what we need. We have lots of churches, and I've been in hundreds of churches across the United States and several other countries. And we have lots of churches that are just kind of there. You've got a few people just going at it, and a whole lot of people just kind of watching. And I don't know who came up with the stat, but I'd say it's pretty accurate that most churches have 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. I'd say that's fairly accurate. That what might change is it may be a lower percentage of people working doing a higher percentage of work. It might be more like 10% of the people doing 90% of the work, but something like that. And so what happens with the other 80%? So if most churches across the world are functioning on 20% of the people contributing, what would happen to those churches if the other 80% were to contribute? And they were to be part of reaching people with the gospel, to be part of anything that's going on. Instead of just coming and saying, all right, see if you can try to bless me today. Not going to happen. Well, you're probably right if you have that attitude. But instead of being that kind of standoffish or just observing to say, hey, I'm still alive, my heart's still beating, I'm going to do everything I can. Some people say, well, I'm too old, I'm pushing 50. Moses was 80 when he started, the project of taking people out of children of Israel. 80, pushing retirement age for most people. And he suddenly becomes really the biggest name in the world at 80 years old. And he helps take a whole bunch of slaves, a few million, out of the most powerful nation in the world, and they walk out without ever fighting. Does that not seem odd to you? I mean, he was big news. 40 years later, the people are still trembling when they get to Jericho because they heard of what happened in Egypt. I mean, this is a big thing. Moses is already dead, and they're still shaking in their boots because they realize who his God is. And you say, well, that was Moses. Yeah, but he was 80. Just go back to that point again. And he did that for 40 years. And he several times complained to God and says, what do you have against me? This is hard. Like, give me somebody else to deal with or kill me or something. He said, I can't even get out of this job. I never signed up for it. I can't get fired. God's the one that put me here. And as long as we have oxygen in our lungs and blood in our heart, we should say, okay, I'm going to serve the Lord with everything I've got. And that looks different for different people. And that's okay. That's how God made us. Ahimaaz, I mentioned, he wasn't a soldier. He was a volunteer. And he says, I will go. Let me run. He's just asking permission to do something very difficult and actually dangerous. The communication in battle in the time of David would not be exactly the same as the communication today. Today, you can instantly send messages all around the world, and you can mass communicate very, very quickly. You can't do that in the time of David's. They were relying on a trumpet. So what if somebody on either side didn't hear the trumpet or didn't want to obey the call that the battle's over? To be out there and then to run is dangerous. You get caught, somebody's going to mow you down. It doesn't matter which side it is. And it's not necessarily like the medieval times where you have the red flags and the blue flags and you just have to make sure you only kill somebody wearing the opposite flag because you have no idea who the person is. You get out in battle and you things change. They're not thinking clearly. You can't see clearly. And your adrenaline's going through the roof. And it's like, man, I'm just out here trying to survive. It's dangerous to be the messenger. It's dangerous to be on the battlefront. And Ahimaaz says, let me run. I'm not worried about the details. There's just something that has to be done. Somebody's got to tell the king, let me run. And I love that spirit of being a volunteer and someone who's going to go forward. So we see verse 20, Joab, the general for David, the one who killed Absalom, Joab said unto him, thou shalt not bear tidings this day, but thou shalt bear tidings another day. But this day thou shalt not bear tidings, or thou shalt bear no tidings, because the king's son is dead. What? He told him no. I do not understand that. I've never told anybody no, they can't serve. If somebody says, hey, pastor, I want to be a volunteer. Okay. There's somebody who wants to be a volunteer, something they're not ready to do. I've got a couple guys in our church that say, hey, I want to drive the route. I want to drive to pick up people. We have several different routes. We use anything. We had a donkey, we'd use one of those. But we use a pickup truck, and we throw about 20 people in the back of a pickup truck. You think I'm kidding. I mean, I can show you pictures. This is how every day, it's every service. This is how we roll. So this is a small truck. It's about the size of it would be the class of the Tacoma or the Frontier. It's a Volkswagen. They don't have those here. But small, double cab, small bed. And we just, we fit about 20 people in there. We've got a Mazda 5. You can get about 12 people in there. And we've got what we call a 15-passenger van. It's about the half the size of the Ford 15-passenger vans here. But it's a little Toyota. It's literally the same size as the pickup truck as far as bumper to bumper. It's just a short vehicle. But you can it's got 15 seats, so you can get about 28 in there. And that's just how we roll. And we do our routes there. And sometimes I'll say, hey, pastor, I want to help with one of the routes. And I'll ask a simple question. Do you have a driver's license? No. Well, you can't help with the route. That would be one of the very few times when I would say you can't do it. So I have several guys today who are running the routes. The volunteers, they went out and bought their own truck. They went out and got a license just so they could drive and help bring people to church. Imagine that. So they've been living their lives without a car just fine. They got a car and then upgraded to a truck. We've got several families that did this. They got a license. These are not people who are 20 years old. We're talking 40-year-olds. They say, hey, well, if I got to have a license to drive church route, well, I want to drive church route, so I'm going to go get a driver's license. That's expensive. Costs about $200 there, which you say, well, that's a lot of money. Minimum wage is $365 a month. So $200 is a lot of money. If you compared that to here, you'd be almost adding another zero on the end of it. It's a big chunk of cash. And they're doing that. They're paying for it. They're going to get their own license. And then they buy their own car so they can help bring people to church. Pretty awesome. Now, it's frustrating when you come here to the United States and you have limits of how many people you can put inside of a vehicle. And like they have to wear some kind of safety restraint, and you can't have people hanging off on the bumpers and stuff. I do not understand why all those things exist here. But either way, you can get a van, I guess. People say, oh, it's safety. Whatever, we have a world to win. And so we just drive slow and it all works out okay. We've actually had several vehicles in accidents, but actually it's never been our driver's faults, and it's always been when the vehicles are empty. Lord is good like that. I think the car, I don't know if it got done. It was getting painted yesterday. They were trying to get that fixed up from the last time it got wrecked. I think that one's I bought it as a totaled vehicle. I think we've repainted it like 3 times in the last 2 years. It's just kind of how life is. We just, things get banged up down there. But you have these guys that say, hey, I want to be a volunteer. I want to drive the route. And I say, you can't. You don't have a license. They say, so if I get a license, I can drive the route? If you get a license and I can see you drive well, sure. So literally they have to do a driving test. So they get a license, and then I say, hey, let's go for a ride. And so after I feel like they're kind of confident and we're not going to kill everybody we're trying to bring to church, I say, sure, here's you go. Here's the keys. And so our vehicles, they get beaten up. Everybody in the world learns to ride on learns to drive in our church vehicles. But that's how we roll. And you say, well, why do you do that? Because I can't drive all of them myself. In fact, I normally don't even drive a route anymore. I like driving the routes, but doesn't work. We get to church and we just hand over the keys, and they take our car and take any other car they can find, and they're all gone. The only thing they don't take is my motorcycle, so sometimes I drive my motorcycle just so I have a ride later. But other than that, everything just kind of goes out. Sometimes I use my motorcycle for routes, but you just can't get as many people on those. It's limited. And actually, this isn't even a joke. We're getting a motorcycle hopefully soon that has a truck bed on the back, and so you can get about 10 people in the back of that thing. And so it's like a tricycle. It's amazing what you guys what we can come up with when you have a necessity. So we're working towards getting one of those hopefully in the next month or so. And just you say, man, we have a lot to do. I just love that spirit of being a volunteer. And I'm never going to say no to a volunteer that you can't help, except for, if you need to just qualify more. But Joab said, no, you can't volunteer. I don't want you to go. And in the next verse, he sends somebody else. Verse 21, then Joab said to Cushi, go tell the king what thou hast seen. And Cushi bowed himself unto Joab and ran. So Cushi was a good soldier. He was there. Joab called him. He listened. Joab gave him orders. He bowed in obedience, basically like a salute, and he obeyed. He took off running. You say, well, that's great. Yeah, Cushi's good. But Ahimaaz volunteered. Cushi had to wait for somebody else to think for him. He's just going to follow orders. Ahimaaz says, I don't need orders. I see the need. I will be part of the solution here. And so we want to be that way. But Ahimaaz, he wasn't discouraged when somebody else was chosen. It's easy for us to get in a little groove. It's easy for us to focus on us. It's easy for us to get our feelings hurt because somebody else was called upon or recognized or whatever. And our kind of natural and fleshly response is, okay, I'll just go sit in the corner and pout for a while until everybody takes note that I'm sitting in the corner and pouting because I didn't get what I want. And you say, wow, Pastor, that doesn't really happen. Yeah, absolutely. There's not a good word in Spanish for pout like we have in English. And I'm still looking for it. And it just doesn't come over the same way. But I deal with that probably 2 or 3 times a week. Somebody just got their feeling hurt because somebody else, whatever, And you're like, why is this even an issue? And one conversation, somebody's like, I was like, so what's the deal? You look like you've been sucking on lemons all day, and you're just waiting for somebody to ask why you're upset. So I'll bite. Why are you upset? Well, first you're just always like, oh, I'm not upset. Okay, you're a liar, and I'm busy, so I don't have time for this, okay? So let's just get down to the chat, to the deep part here. Why are you upset? And then you get down into it, and it's like, well, I'm pretty upset because the other day you asked so-and-so, to do that job that I wanted to do. I said, since when have you wanted to do that job? Well, I really don't, but since you asked him instead of me, why does it matter? Do something else. I mean, there's a lot of things to be done. And I said, so why aren't you doing your own job? Well, Just been so upset about not doing somebody else's job, I haven't had time to do my own job. Really? Just do what you're supposed to do and it'll be all fine. It doesn't matter. And you recognize somebody from the pulpit and you just, hey, thanks somebody for, whatever thing. And you forgot to mention one person who showed up to help too, like at the last minute, and they didn't bring the donuts. But, they were there and you didn't mention them and now they're all upset. And you say, so why are you offended? Well, you don't love me. Well, that may be true, but why are you offended? And you say, well, you didn't recognize me from the pulpit like you did the other people. And you're like, really? Like, are we serving God or are we serving people? Or how is that working out there? One of my life verses is Ephesians 6:6. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. And that's the kind of servants of God that we should be. Ahimaaz wasn't discouraged when somebody else was chosen. It wasn't important to him what others were doing. He was just going to focus on doing his part. We really just need to be that kind of Christian. He didn't feel like he was in competition. He felt like there was an opportunity, and he said, let me run. I really like Ahimaaz that he did not take no for an answer. I love that. There's so many people that are so easily stopped. And they're like, well, you can't do it, you can't do it. I'm like, really? And we have a saying that we say frequently in our ministry in El Salvador. There's a solution for everything. There's a solution for everything. So somebody says, Pastor, man, I can't do this. I'm like, well, we just haven't figured out how. It can be done. You just got to work at it harder. You got to work at it different. Find somebody who's better at it. And they come to me and I said, I don't know. I've never done it either. They said, well, I don't know how to do this. I said, I don't either. They're like, well, it can't be done. It can be done. We just haven't done it yet. Figure it out. I'm like, well, I can't figure it out. It's like, what's the matter with you? All right, let's go together. And so then I start asking questions. And then they figure it out. I'm like, I'm not necessary. You figured it out. You did it. Ta-da. Why are we talking about this? Just get it done. And Ahimaaz, he's one of these guys, he's not taking no for an answer. Joab said, the general, this would be the most authoritative person after the king. He said, no. And he told him 3 times, you are not, well, he told him twice, you're not taking tidings today. And another time he said, you'll take him a different day. So he said, no. Well, he comes back to Joab. Cushi's running. There he goes. And he continues. Verse 22. Then said Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, yet again to Joab, but howsoever, let me, I pray thee, also run after Cushi. It's the second time he said, let me run. And Joab said, wherefore wilt thou run, my son, seeing thou hast no tidings ready? But howsoever, said he, let me run. That's the third time he said that. And he said unto him, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain and overran Cushi. This guy's awesome. When he overran him, that means he got there first. He went faster. He completed the mission before the other guy. Now, I mentioned early on that Ahimaaz was not a soldier. Well, let me tell you who Ahimaaz is and give you the rest of his story. He was the son of Zadok. Zadok was the priest in the tabernacle. They were there and they came to David when he was leaving. And David says, you guys stay here in the tabernacle, stay here serving, and then you can let me know what's going on. So Ahimaaz, I believe it's Jonathan who was with him, they were the informants. And so as Absalom's preparing to go out, they go and they tell David what's coming. Because they're working in the tabernacle, because they are essentially priest or priest in training, nobody suspects them, but somebody saw them. And you may remember the story. They hid in a well, and they covered the well with like a blanket, and they used it like a table, and they're working there, and they didn't find them, and they wandered off looking somewhere else for these informants. They felt like they were going to inform David, and they tried to intercept him, and then they get out of the well, and they run, and they tell David, this is Ahimaaz. I don't know why he was on the battlefield that day. He's not a soldier. He really shouldn't have been there. But he felt the need to be there. And he wasn't just watching. He says, let me run. He was a good runner. He had already done a dangerous mission. He had already gone and helped save the king and the soldiers' lives. This is a normal guy. He's not a soldier, and he's doing stuff that most soldiers couldn't do. Why? Because his heart was in it. because he was serving God and not serving people. Because he was focused on what God could do through him and just what he could just use what he had. Ahimaaz wasn't Joab. I don't think Ahimaaz would have been the person to actually throw the darts through Joab's heart or through Absalom's heart like Joab did. I don't think that would be Ahimaaz. He wasn't the brave soldier. He was a runner. But he wasn't running from problems. He was running and being part of solutions. And you see Ahimaaz and you say, this guy's really not well known. You probably remember him now. And you say, this guy did a lot. And he did what he could do. He was not worried about anybody else. He was focused on his job. And he didn't take no for an answer. I think sometimes we're so easily discouraged. And we say, well, you can't do it, can't do it. Well, I think you got to keep working at it. My mom's been praying for her brother's salvation for probably 50 years. Spent 30 years without talking to him at all. Zero communication. Not even when my grandmother, his mother, died. There was no communication there. He did not want to be part of the family. And that's been the case for years. My mom has prayed for him. My mom, years ago, sent him some gospel tapes. Back when that's how you listen to stuff. As a teenager, I sent him some tapes and even some CDs. It was kind of that transition time. Some of the young people are like, tapes. Even CDs, you're like, You used to like store information on them. You could use electronic devices to listen to them, okay? Before the internet. But, and so I tried to send him a few things, but never really knew if he got it or not. He has lots of addresses in Florida. His goal in life was to be a millionaire by 40 years old. He accomplished that by 30. And he's a self-made man. He's got lots of buildings and lots of things that he's purchased. And he's that rich uncle that doesn't know the Lord and didn't want anything to do with our family. I did meet him once, apparently, when I was about 3 or 5 years old, something like that, and literally Mom has had no communication with him since then. She was burdened about him, and she bought him a book about salvation, an easy book, and with no return address, she sent him this book. She somehow figured out which house he actually lived at, and looking him up online, and she sent him a book, and at the end of the book, she wrote him a personal note and said, I hope that you read this book. I'm worried about your soul. I want to see you in heaven one day. This is your only sister. Put her name and number. Call me if you would like to talk. Well, her phone rings a couple weeks later, and he called her. And so they've been talking. And so Mom, then communicated with, with the rest of us, her family, and said, hey, your uncle messaged me back. And we're all like, she used to have two brothers. One she's pretty close to, and the other one, like literally none of us know him. And so we're like, but, it doesn't make any sense. So she tells us a story of how that she's reached out to her brother, who she's still praying will get saved, and she still doesn't think that he is. But he started to open the door, and he's talking about God. And when they were living together as teenagers, he didn't want anything to do with God. And even after that, as my mom was going to Bible college and things, he wouldn't want anything to do with that. Didn't even want to hear about it. Later, my grandpa got saved, and he went to Bible college with my mom. And again, my uncle didn't want anything to do with any of that. But my mom says, I can't just pray. I have to keep praying, but I'm going to do something about it. I got to try to reach out to him. And so she, literally had to pay money. That's what happens sometimes when we want to see something happen. And she says, I'll buy this book. I'll ship this book. I'll put myself out there a little bit. I really want to see him saved. And we're still praying for his salvation. He might meet up with some of my family, not us. We're going to be in Salvador, but some of the rest of my family. For Christmas and get around my family at Christmas. I mean, the whole focus is about God. That's kind of how it works. And some of them are getting together. My parents, one of my brothers. I don't know who else show up. I'm not going to be there. But so he might be coming to that and have an opportunity to hear about God's saving grace. And my mom says, man, I want to see him saved. And I love that spirit of I want to be part of the solution. I don't want to wait around. I don't want to wonder. I don't want to regret that I never shared the gospel with this beloved person. I want to be the one who's part of helping others to know Christ and knowing about an eternal salvation. I want to be part of reaching the world with the gospel. Pastor Brown mentioned in the first service that this church supports 97 missionary projects. That's phenomenal. And that's amazing to see how God is using this church. But there's so many more people to be reached with the gospel. You can't go anywhere without finding a need. You walk out of this building and you go in any direction. You don't have to go a whole block and you'll find a lot of unreached or at least unsaved people. We need to reach them with the gospel. You go to any part of the world. I know many of the missionaries back there. I know the Nibbies who are coming. We've been supporting them from our church in El Salvador for many years. And I see this, and I've been in different parts of the world. I've been in the Philippines and all over Latin America, and there's just a need anywhere you go with the gospel. But there needs to be people who say, okay, I'm going to be part of reaching the world with the gospel. Personally, I will share the gospel. Personally, I will help other people to go to the rest of the world and share the gospel. Count me in. Let me run. God has given me whatever it is. He's given you unique abilities, experiences, spiritual gifts for those that are saved, and says, those are to serve God with. That's the reason you have them. And so, as Ahimaaz said, we should say the same. Let me run. Don't try to get in my way. Don't try to stop me. That would be dangerous. I'm going forward. I want to serve the Lord with everything I've got. And that's how we should live our lives. We don't know when we're going to die, but we know we will. Before moving to El Salvador, I had been to like 2 or 3 funerals in my life. Since going to El Salvador, I've done hundreds. It happens. And I've been to so many funerals. Sometimes it's a different culture. You go to funerals, people I didn't even know, but I know their family. And so I'll go to that funeral. I'll go to the overnight viewing. And it is constant. It's almost weekly. And it's just very common. But I've buried people literally from 100 years old. And I buried a baby that was only a couple minutes old when it died. And everything in between. There's no age on this. We know that nobody's getting out of life alive. That's how it works. It's the only way to finish this life is to die. This is our cycle. But the people I'm looking at today are all alive. Actually, I assume that. Some of you have been pretty still. Those that are alive, raise one of your hands. It doesn't matter which one. Okay. Pastor, that's more than half. Okay, so we're good. We are all still alive, and at different stages of life, different life experiences, different things that we can do, different spiritual gifts, all of that, God has uniquely gifted every person to do exactly what he wants you to do in this world while you have life. So, to each and every one of us today, the declaration we should be making to God is, let me run. That may not be physical. It may not be literally like going and delivering messages like Ahimaaz did. We send a text message. It's so much faster now. But there are so many ways to serve the Lord. And you say, well, I can't serve the Lord because of... Just eliminate that reason. We can serve the Lord because that's how he made us. He made us to serve him. And he's gifted us with what we need to serve him. So as Ahimaaz said, let me run. There's somebody here this morning who doesn't know Jesus as your personal Savior. You've not been forgiven of your sins. You're still carrying that weight of your decisions and your sin. And you're thinking, what's going to happen to me when I die? Friend, I want to tell you, God wants to save you. That's the reason that Jesus died on the cross. You don't have to carry the burden of those sins. God wants to help each of us to be able to have complete access to God, which could only happen after we've had our sins forgiven. Once we're saved, he wants to use us and say, okay, now I want you to be part of reaching the world with the gospel. That's literally why we're here on this earth. So as we finish this morning, I want to ask two questions, and then we'll have an invitation giving you an opportunity to respond. The first question is, are you sure you're on your way to heaven? Are you sure when you die today, you are going to heaven? The second question is, for those who answered yes to the first one, are you serving God with everything that he's given you to serve him? If the answer is no to either one of those questions, friend, you've got some things to take care of. And today and right now is the time to do that.